right. So this two-part relationship that may explain why Pompey got his head screwed up. It's my theory that that's the foundation of thought. And when we talk about a reification error, I call it a reification error. The right name, the better way to describe it is a confusion of our ideas with their objects.
And to put in context with a couple people in now, like this is something that happens daily. I mean, in common conversations, correct?
Oh yeah, all the time. And there's all sorts of different two-part ways to describe it. I say an idea and their object. An idea is something that's happening inside of our head. And there's an object to our idea, just like there's an object to a noun or an object to a sentence. We can think of it as a symbol that is not a symbol talking about some experience. So we talk about the word red, which means that feeling in our eyes when we look at those things that we know are red, like apples or pussies or whatever. We can talk about a word, and that's referring to a feeling, like, Rick. Well, it's important to go learn which words go with which feelings. And if we have a clear designation between the words and feelings, whether it's a color or an emotion or an abstraction, the better we connect those guys up, the better we can communicate. And then it can get more abstract when you get to weird languages, like a variable that represents a number. But those are all similar types of two-part abstractions between the experience and the description, or the really popular one is the map and the territory. Right? The map is the language, and the territory is life.
Yeah.
And very often, this two-part structure, if you get it wrong philosophically, it makes a nightmare. It can create outrageous results, and this is going to sound insane, but I was trying to write an email back in like 2005 to my dad about why he's wrong on gay marriage. And by the way, we were talking earlier about libertarians. The libertarian candidate in '72, the first libertarian candidate, was the first guy in American politics to come out in favor of gay marriage.
That's awesome.
He was also open homosexual. So
that's
who brought gay marriage to the table. The libertarians have been bringing a lot of issues to the table for a long time that the other two parties didn't bring. And in that regard, I think if it comes down to solving this weird polarization, I think the libertarians kind of have a leg up on who should lead that debate.
Well, one thing about the extreme, and before we go too, and I don't think we'll go too far political, the benefit of the extremity of really the mainstream left, in my opinion, I'm sure there's people who disagree there, but is that a lot of moderate leftists will probably, where they otherwise may have been Democrats, go libertarian. And I have a feeling that a lot of people will end up libertarian that are currently, Trump, what I would call Trumpists, and kind of ignore some of the other things he does. So I think you're right about that.
Just to get an idea how much the libertarians have influenced things, that political map is a libertarian map. That political map was originally invented by libertarians to talk about the political versus the economic freedoms.
That's
now,
awesome.
Whether that's the right map, whether the libertarians are awesome or just happen to be good at communicating, that's a different issue. But the point is, they've got some credit. They've got some track record for being bridge builders.
Well, exactly, and that's
for honestly addressing the issues.
When we talk about what you just said, when you talk about power structures, right? You typically have to have a two-handed power structure of some kind. I mean, a left and a right hand, literally, or for that matter, a moral law and a legal order. You have a lot of things in societies that happen, and it's typically that minority, perceived minority, but probably majority, something like libertarian, that does push the most change, because without it, what you have is basically an agreement between two entities on how to control everyone else. With the third entity, is how you're able to push some progress.
Well, we've seen this a lot. The Republicans and the Dems, they tend to lean toward the more populist ideas. They like in a healthy society, we like to see the moderation. We like to see the extremes coming together and finding common ground. When we get a situation like Rwanda, where the people are killing the moderates, that's a bad fucking sign. When they start wiping out the moderates, that's when we know someone's getting it. Like they're ordering machetes next. So I mean, these kind of process moves. We want to talk about the politics. To the degree that the libertarians are the middle ground, the people who don't like the libertarians, they tend to be the ones that aren't looking to solve a problem. They're looking to start a fight.
Yeah, I would say that. Oh shoot, I would say that libertarians is really cool. I would say they're looking to propose solutions regardless of who applies them. Would that be a fair statement, you think? So in other words, libertarians frequently know they have no chance of actually winning, but they want to get the solutions on the board, on the record. You know what I mean?
The libertarians have been setting the agenda for like 3/4 of the last 40 years.
Yep.
Because they set the agenda, they bring out things that people prefer, because most people they do prefer their economic and their political liberty. And the Republicans tend to lean toward the libertarians sooner because they're not as cool on economic issues. And then the Dems tend to lean on the Republicans because they're the more populist one. And so the libertarians are sort of leading the charge, but they're not very good at marketing. Half the problem with libertarians is that they're all the systematic thinkers who don't really organize. They just sort of recognize that the spontaneous order is healthier and they shouldn't be enough in each other's business, and they don't think in terms of groups, so they don't ever get their shit together and organize.
Yeah. So you have this awesome Plato versus Marx here.
Plato versus Marx. Plato versus Marx are two opposite sides. So the reification error, what I call the reification error, it's really the wrong name. It's the confusion of our ideas with their objects.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So like how Nazis or how Antifa call people fascists, for example.
Yes, that's an example. Plato fixed his mistake in one way. Marx fixed the exact same mistake in a different way. Hume versus Kant. These guys had a similar disagreement across this reification error, where they confused their ideas with their objects. Plato concluded that there aren't any objects.
Plato concluded there aren't any objects, only abstractions, which I could.
Ideas and the perfect forms are this complete dissociation from the reality of feeling and sensation and experience. All of reality is really just this broken bullshit version of real reality.
Sorry. Okay.
Right? If reality is only ideas, that's idealism.
Yeah.
And there's reasons why we know that's wrong, but that's where Plato went.
Yeah, and obviously, like you were just saying, there's reasons we know it's wrong, but it's also an important distinguishment to start with even the ability to think, okay, everything's only ideas, because what we're about to see here is only material. And it's because of these two positions, we can even think in the forms of it being both material and ideas. So that's why I really appreciate the fact that Plato's stepped further and then cover what Marx is doing here with the materialism.
Well, these guys made like opposite mistakes.
Yep.
Right? We have a symbol, and that symbol is referring to a reality or an experience, a feeling, a sensation, a perception. And we have these words or these ideas or these concepts in order to communicate among our own minds or between each other. And the symbol can be a sound, it can be a shape, it can be a hand sign. There's all sorts of things that we can use as abstractions that refer to some other experience. And we can have symbols, a different symbol that turns around and talks about the first symbol.
Yeah.
So we can have a symbol that represents how much we sold last week, and then we have another symbol that represents the statistical anomaly that particular sale happens to represent.
This is a fun example you can give where like two sisters create their own little language in their own household, right? Where basically they're able to create a language where they create symbols about a symbol.
Well, that's a different story.
Okay.
And let's talk about that. That's semiotics.
Awesome.
And this comes up a lot. Semiotics is this idea about what it means to mean something, right? Like, what's this word mean? Mean. Have you ever thought about that? What does it mean?
Well, it all depends on it depends on context, interpretation, also, how we've been conditioned to learn. But you have the average. If you have the mean, you have someone who's agitated or possibly being hurtful. You have a ton of things that mean can mean. It all depends on the subject.
When I talk about assigning a meaning, when I say something and you know what I'm talking about, that means we are aligned on which symbol, which experience.
Yeah, it's like a wavelength connection of some kind.
Well, one of the common errors that people make is when they say, "Well, you're using your words wrong." Wait, what? Well, no. This means nasty and brutish. Well, no, wait, what? No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
it does. If you're using that word, that's what you mean. No, wait, hold on. Time out a second. Who's in charge of what I mean?
That's you couldn't be more correct about this. This is always a big issue in a lot of houses, I'm sure. But yeah.
It happens all the time. When I attach a word to some experience or some idea or some relationship, I'm the one who decides what it attaches to. Yeah, but nobody else talks that way. Okay, well, fair enough. You know what? Fair enough. If I'm using it in a goofy ass way, then it's my job to explain what the fuck I'm using it for.
And that's exactly right. Yeah.
If I'm to do it in some goofy ass way, then it's my job to explain why that might be okay, and just play along for the moment, right? I understand that nobody else uses it that way, but just play along for the moment.
Yep.
And see where it goes. Like that sort of communication about word meaning. That's a really, really common error, where someone sort of gets this attitude that I'm in charge of what you mean. I'm in charge of which symbol goes with which experience. I'm in charge of which word goes which way. No, you're not. You're in charge of which words you use.
Exactly.
You can use your words to mean whatever you want, and if it goes against the convention and you don't explain yourself, all of a sudden you're spiraling off into la la.
And this is here's a great example of this, and I'm just going to give a quick story to illustrate it. I forget the gentleman's name, but in the group, a discussion back and forth regarding, Nazism, and this person's regarding, full on the kind of policies he's wanting are more aligned with Nazism, and then calling libertarianism Nazism, and thus basically say, well, what you're advocating for is closer to Nazism, and then that person is unable to disassociate his political opposite from a quote unquote Nazi, despite the fact that all of his policies more closely align with it. And it's over and over with no explanation. And thus you get the error you're referring to here, reification error, because the person is assigning a meaning or stating something they can't defend, which already has meaning assigned to it.
Well, here's the thing. When we do Nazi equals, there's the definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we really mean the criteria. Like, which things are we saying fit? And then there's also the evidence that it actually fits.
That's exactly right, yeah.
There's two pieces to this puzzle, right? There's one, saying the criteria so we know what the hell you're talking about. And then there's also whether or not the accusation actually applies. Like, did the guy actually do that shit? So if Nazi means, you wear you wear the swastika and the scary outfit. I mean, there's a lot of chicks in the BDSM world that are Nazis. There's more to it. There's like an ideological component.
Yeah, exactly. If you stop at that
and suppression, and some people, they want to say it's like anti-Semitism, although that's not. The anti-Semitism of Hitler was almost like a side effect of his anti-Semitic
Well,
agenda.
to be fair, everything is a byproduct of the assignment here, and I think this is a great time to underscore because because effectively where it doesn't Hitler's policies, what he's going to do, where he assigns that to is less relevant than the how he conceptualizes these things or symbolizes them, to do. So, and this is where a lot of people get hung up on. That first layer, that most raw descriptive layer, is about the most irrelevant component. So, like, for example, Nazi, National Socialist, or I don't think that's what it means, but whatever the hell Nazi meant back in the original time frame is not what it means today. That's not because the actual definition changed. That's because the experience that people had with that symbol changed what it meant.
And this is one of the issues. We mix up our terms with our criteria, and if you're messing up the reification, if you're messing up the idea-object confusion, then it's really easy to get thrown off by just the terms. And you end up arguing about the terms, and you end up arguing about the symbols, and that's not the fucking point. The point is, when you do Nazi things, when you do group thinking things, when you suppress speech, when you suppress ideas, when you reject feedback, when you refuse to update despite the people complaining about your fuck-ups, that's the problem. Doesn't matter what the fucking name is.
Yeah.
Right? There's certain processes and certain behaviors by any name that's the problem. And the reification error makes it hard to talk about. That's one of the things that Orwell talked about. If we attack the language, then we can't talk about the reality anymore. That's why the reification error fucking matters. Because hacking on the language, using the reification error to hide the experience is totalitarian nihilism. That's the fucking problem. How can it happen here? Because you can't connect your ideas to your experiences anymore, you dumb fuck bastard. If you can't talk about this shit, they get away with more. That's the problem.
Yep. So effectively, and in a more, let's say, domestic setting, what's a good example of a reification error that you would commonly see in a setting like a household?
Like in a household?
A household or a Thanksgiving. Let's say this. Let's say it's a Thanksgiving extended family. What kind of reification errors would you say are common? We could probably start with political, right? You could probably start with political because the moment someone comes into the room, the political.
Does your family fight every Thanksgiving?
Mine doesn't, but I think it's a great example.
That's like an ancient trope, right?
Yeah, exactly. But basically,
All right. But here's a really common one. You disagree.
Yeah.
Therefore, duh.
Yeah.
Well, wait a second. Where are we disagreeing? Are we disagreeing on whether the experience happened? Or are we disagreeing on what the implication is as a result of the experience?
Yeah.
And just to give you a really crappy, completely apolitical sort of version. Years ago, I was watching a cop show, and I saw this lady who got pulled out of the car, and the cop said, "Listen, you got to sign the ticket for this because you were speeding." And she's like, "I don't want to sign the ticket." He's like, "No, lady, you got to sign the ticket or I got to arrest you." She's like, "No, fuck you, I'm not signing the ticket." And he ends up like rolling her over on the car.
I saw this, yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, "Okay, well, fine, I'll sign the ticket." He's like, "No, fuck you, we're going to jail now." And on the one hand, we could say she's just being a dumbass. She should just sign the ticket.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the cop was being a totalitarian asshole. And even after she succumbed to his power games, he still didn't want to play along. Like, who's the fucking jackhole here?
Yeah. Well, that always goes along with the common theory that everyone in the situation is mostly fucking stupid. and it really is a remarkable thing where someone is able to get beyond their initial impulsive stupidity. For example, this cop could have heard that, okay, I'll sign the ticket, and immediately remembered that my objective was to get her to sign the ticket, and my objective was not to roll on the ground. I didn't want this. I didn't want to book her. I don't have to still. but in his head, he immediately assigns all of those things with the necessity to now amplify it because of impulsivity. And this is what's kind of going on with them. And that's where everyone's typically behaving in those settings more times than they're not.
All right, so you want some illustrations of the reification here?
Yeah.
What's pollution mean?
All the shit we put into the earth that's not bueno.
It's not good.
Yeah.
All right. Whoops, hold on. Dang it. This freaking, there we go. All right, pollution is stuff that's not good.
That's exactly right. I think I would be hard pressed to find a better definition than that.
Stuff that's not good. This takes the question and pushes it into another word, good.
Yep.
Which stuff isn't good?
This is a common, I use this analogy today, actually. Just because you stop buying a Big Mac and buy a Whopper, just because it's less calories doesn't make it healthy. And this is a common misperception of just because.
By the way, I'm gonna make a connection over here to Orwell. That's some ungood stuff. Orwell talked about double speak, where you have contradictory ideas in your head, and he talked about new speak, where we throw these judgment terms around without really connecting them to anything. This is the idea object confusion, where it's a pure idea and there's no object. What is pollution? I mean, people use this word all the time. They've been using it for 40 years. What's it mean?
Yep.
Can you identify any pollution?
Everyone would point to car exhaust pipe smogs, a litany of different things that make up the not good stuff.
Well, hold on, wait. So we got CO2.
Yep.
Right. That's necessary for plants.
Yep.
Carbon monoxide.
Yep.
That's effectively a fuel.
So these are good things that, depending on the application.
Exactly. The best definition I know for pollution is resources in the wrong place.
That's a great definition.
I learned that from Buckminster Fuller. There is no such thing as pollution. Nature doesn't have pollution. We just need to stop throwing this shit away, and we need to recapture it because we can use those molecules. Like that giant pile of plastic in the ocean.
Yeah.
That's a giant petroleum byproduct. That is it's a synthetic material, synthetic textile, or a possible fuel source. How about exploitation?
Yeah.
Or exploit.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, again, depending on the dynamics of it, right? I mean, I would say, as if I were to try to define it, it is using something of knowledge to procure something of desire at the other's expense.
Well, now hold on a second. The first part, you kind of define advantage.
Yeah.
Right? And we can even say that, it comes down to mechanical advantage, because biochemistry and all of our energy interactions, they come down to leverage, like mechanical advantage, force versus distance.
Yep.
But exploitation brings along that third part at someone else's expense.
Yeah, or at something else's, because we're in this drawing you're making, we can exploit this wedge here in between to have better leverage in a sense of force to better move something from one place to another. So
well, sure, but you see how exploitation versus advantage, like it's to my advantage to hire this guy to do this sewing because I suck at it and I won't have to go back and do it twice if he doesn't, and it's worth more to me to pay him than do it myself because it'll take less time and get done sooner.
Yeah.
With higher quality, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I exploiting it or am I just taking advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah.
Exploitation kind of brings in this extra idea.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is the way exploitation is as a word and the abstraction of the word, or the symbolization of the word kind of adds a different element than just a typical what you would call advantage.
Yes, and that extra element doesn't connect to anything.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a symbol that doesn't have a reality behind it.
Yeah. Great.
It's like this moral opprobrium that doesn't really go anywhere.
It's the first layer of it's a
bad advantage.
Bad advantage.
Where's the bad come from?
That's a great way. Exploitation is a bad advantage. That's funny.
That's the only distinction between these words, is that exploitation has this like extra layer of like.
And obviously, define, as we just discussed. Now you have to define bad. So.
Evil, mean, base.
Right.
All the words that mean selfish and you're a dick, right?
Now, and this is, I would say this might be the first layer you'd find of the jargon and the day-to-day political worlds where you have, exploitation going both directions in the way we perceive exploitation to be, right? Something like using, oh, you're bad because this, you're bad because that, back and forth, back and forth.
Exploitation is a dick move, whereas if you're just fighting advantage, like, and when it really comes down to the political issue, the issue comes down to consent, right? If everybody consents to it, then it really isn't a problem, because it only happened because they wanted it to happen, right? If they didn't consent to it, they wouldn't have taken the steps.
Well, this is the beautiful economic Thomas Sowell argument on why minimum wage costs people money, because it removes people's ability to agree consenting wise to lower wages, which it has that adverse effect, or the kind of paradoxical effect of, by not being able to have that market fully realized, it kind of stagnates all the markets.
Yep. Well, I mean, prices, and this is one of the things that happen. You know what? Let's talk about that. And we're coming up in an hour here, so we should probably start winding down. But prices are another example of a symbol. Like, what is a price? Like,
this is great. I've been doing this on the UBI thing for some time now, actually.